Hey guys, Pastor Adam here. I pray that this resource would bless you wherever you are. If you're local to Newaygo County here in Michigan, I pray that you would find a home here at Second Church. If you're not local, I trust that the Holy Spirit would lead you to a body of believers. Wherever you are, listening to this resource or watching this video is not a substitute for being part of a local, committed body of believers who can come around you in discipleship, study the Word together, and support you in your life and enable you to get plugged into what God is doing. We're not meant to be separate. We're meant to be together. So that's my prayer for you as you begin this journey. Make sure you've got a Bible open so that you can hear from God as you watch or as you listen.
So we've come to the center of our worship service. It is this book, the Bible. Ordinarily, I would say that the Bible is the thing that we're here to just be excited about, but there are little ones in the room that normally are gone by now, and so I have to add one extra thing for them to be excited about that parents maybe not as much, but it's Christmas. And so, kids, this is an announcement for you to keep yourself joyful, but also focused during the next few minutes. At the end of the service, the deacons have prepared some candy. And if you would love the candy, you have to come up here, and I believe Randy is going to be up here passing out candy. Everyone say hi, Randy. Randy has your candy, which rhymed unintentionally. So there's that to look forward to after the service. Thank you for joining us. Your little hearts I'm excited to have with us this morning. I'm actually really excited because we are coming towards the end of the book of Malachi. We have today, and then we have one more message. And the end is very much like if you've ever been to a symphony or listened to a classical piece of music. It sort of crescendos with really good news. So for the little ears in the room, it gets really exciting at the end. The reason that is God tells really good stories. And God is, I expect anyway, that God is going to share with us some really exciting things today. Anytime you approach God's word, actually, you should be excited and expect that he's going to speak to you. And so the way that you do that is through prayer when you speak to him, but through having his word open in front of you. And so if you brought a Bible, we're going to be in Malachi chapter 3 today. If you didn't, there are Bibles in the pews around you where you can get your phone out. If you're a techie and find Malachi chapter 3, we're going to pick up basically right where we left off last week for a sermon that I'm going to call Joyful Returns. That is sort of the theme that God has sort of laid out for us today is things coming back, both his messenger, but also in the way that we shepherd our resources, things come back to us. We're going to be reading 6 verses, Malachi 3, 6 through 12, so if you'll navigate your way there. And then I just ask that you would join me in prayer once more. We're going to ask God to help us to see and understand what he's prepared for us this morning. Father in heaven, we thank you that we get to even be in your presence. We thank you that you step into our lives, our messy lives, and you equip us to serve you in various ways. We ask as we approach your word this morning that you would open our hearts, that you would open our minds, that you would open our eyes and our ears so that your message would settle into our hearts, settle into us, so that we might be changed forever. Help each person in this room and everyone watching online and anyone who ever encounters this message to not be unchanged by what you have to say. We ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So, Malachi chapter 3, beginning in verse 6. I, the Lord, do not change. So you, O descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Ever since the time of your forefathers, you have turned away from my decrees and have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. But you ask, how are we to return? Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings, you are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. I will prevent pests from devouring your crops, and the vines in your fields will not cast their fruit, says the Lord Almighty. Then all the nations will call you blessed, for yours will be a delightful land, says the Lord Almighty. So God's got I think a lot to say that that passage is one of the most popular in all of Christendom, this section that we just read today. It's one of the most used, but I would also argue one of the most misused passages. It's one that talks about giving. And so it's really easy for people who want to get on TV and be like television preachers to get up and say, see, God says, give me all your money, and so send it all. And so what I think we need to do this morning as we approach God's word is to really recognize what he's saying, but also what he's not saying. He's not saying, hey, give me all your money and then you'll be blessed. That's the misunderstanding. It's not, I give to the church and so I'm healthy. I give to the church and so I'm wealthy. That's not how that works. It's not transactional where I do something for God so that I can say, I say this every week, we check a box. It's not a box check and then we can expect that God does things. That's not what this is about. This is God saying, hey, I've given you resources. You are to shepherd those resources well. And if you shepherd them well, then logically you've taken good care of things. It will go well for you. It makes perfect sense in the same way that if I don't ever take care of my car, it starts off fine, but eventually it wears down. And if you don't care for it, what happens? It breaks. Or you don't take care of your body, eventually it wears down. That's not weird, it's not spiritual, it's just logic. It's the way that God designed things to work. And I think we can sort of tackle that in maybe three ways. First, addressing this is the same God that makes all of the other promises. And so it's a promise he's going to keep. And he starts with that, which I think is really important. So we're going to talk about how this is the same God. We're going to talk about poor decisions, both decisions that are poor and decisions that we might consider to make us poor. That's one of the ways that this passage is misunderstood. And then we're going to talk about what it looks like to experience an overflowing. That's our roadmap for the day. So I'd like, if you could, look back at the way that the section we read today opens. Look back at verse 6. It begins, I, the Lord, do not change. So you, descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Ever since the time of your forefathers, you have turned away from my decrees and have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. So what does he mean, I, the Lord, do not change? Well, I think it's important that you recognize that God is the same, even though we're not. So the God that created the heavens and the earth in Genesis chapter 1 is the same God that promised David that there would be an heir that sat on his throne. It's the same God that split the sea so that the people of Israel could get through and escape slavery. It's the same God that rose Jesus from the grave, which I get historically hasn't happened yet in the passage that we're reading. It's the same God. His promises are true. He's consistent. He's faithful. He means what he says always. And so he presents this argument to them. I'm the same, and so I'm not the problem. Because what we keep seeing, and there's a pattern that I think you've probably noticed if you've seen more than one of these messages in this series, God makes a statement, and then the people of Israel respond. And their response is always like a little sarcastic. What do you mean we've disobeyed? Or if you look further down, how are we to return? How have I robbed you? They're like very passive aggressive, very like, I don't understand. Why are you upset? And God's like, hey, that's cute, but listen. It's still me. I'm the same. So the problem here is that someone's changed, and it's not me. You ever had a moment where you realize you're not the same person you used to be? Anyone who's been married more than 5 minutes has experienced this, and so that's a rhetorical question, right? You have like your 1-year anniversary, and you're like, oh, I wonder what's different in the last year. Everything. That's just the nature of people, and marriage is a great way to see that. And I think that friendships are a good way to see that too, and also to have children is a great way to see that people change. And so if you've ever been a child, you've seen it also. You've noticed that perhaps your shoes don't fit, and that's your favorite pair of shoes. And now what even shoes do I wear? I can't wear shoes today. I'm going to go to school barefoot because these are my favorite shoes. That's the moment that God is having with his people. He's saying, hey, maybe you've not noticed, but you're not the same people that you used to be. And so the way that you're acting is not the way that it used to be, and it's not the way it's supposed to be. Let's fix it. That's sort of what he's saying. And then he gets into this like forefathers thing, which I think is really important to sort of zero in on, because it's easy to think that what he's talking about is the first generation of exile. So if you were here for week 1, and if you weren't, that's okay, 45-second review right now. The people that we're hearing about are the remnant of Israel. The rest of the nation of Israel is in exile right now as we read this story. And so those people who are in exile are not able to hear this message right away. They're taken from their homes. They live somewhere else. And when you hear the word forefathers, its common use would be something like your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-grandparents. That's like the common use of that word. But you have to kind of remember who it is that's talking. So it's God. And so it's likely that he's not choosing a common use of a word because this whole time, the entire book, he's been very like big picture. And so it's super unlikely that in this moment he decides to be specific. And so you could look at it as it's the grandparents of the people that he's talking to, which would be the first people to go into exile in this part of history. It's actually more likely that you're looking at God talking about the patriarchs, which would be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the people that were the original founding members that produced the entire nation of Israel, which actually, I think, changes the way you look at this entirely. And here's what I mean. When he says, ever since the time of your forefathers, you have turned away from my decrees and have not kept them, that, if it's an exile thing, you would easily be able to say, oh, well, they were worshiping idols and now they're in exile. Look how bad that is. But I think it's bigger than that, and I think that if you'll kind of indulge me, what if God's talking about Abraham and Isaac? What if he's saying, hey, the people that you look at as the heroes of your faith family, which, in Christ, that's our family. So rather than look at those people as like rock stars, what if we acknowledge that they were messing up, that you've been screwing up since the beginning of this process? Maybe that changes the arrogance that you walk around with. Because I think that's maybe the issue, and that's why they respond the way that they do every time. Well, I'm disappointed in you because you're doing this. Well, what do you mean I'm doing this? There's an arrogance there that I think God is trying to deal with. He's trying to stir the pot to a point where they can sort of understand, hey, this is not a new problem. So let's look at Abraham. He's the father of faith, and we look and we say, man, Abraham's faith was so strong. But also, Abraham tried to sell his wife twice. I mean, give it a shot. It's not a good plan. Nobody laughed, but you should have. It's a bad idea. Don't try it. And then Isaac was his son. Isaac sort of watched that whole deal unfold. And then Isaac takes over sort of the family line. And then, spoiler alert, Isaac tries to sell his wife. Pay attention. It's a bad idea. So generationally, nobody's learning anything. Then you get to Jacob. He doesn't sell anyone. Jacob would be Isaac's son. He's the one who actually has the 12 children that become the 12 tribes. He has 4 wives, which I'm not great in math, but that's too many. It's too many, guys. God says 1. Believe him. It's a good idea. So Jacob has 4. And that's just one example. Abraham has a myriad of other mistakes that he makes, that Isaac makes also, that Jacob makes also. And so what God, I think, is saying is, hey, since this whole thing started, you have not been paying attention. He gave us the law in Exodus. We're not following it. He gave us in Leviticus clarity on the law and ways it applies in everyday life. We're not doing that. So he's speaking to a people who have every opportunity to follow and be obedient, who are not. And he's like, you know what? Maybe let's just call a spade and say you guys have screwed up a few too many times. And I think maybe it's time I fix it. And that should be, anyway, really good news for you guys. Because as a church, I think we can sort of all acknowledge, either quietly or you can do it out loud, it's up to you, we've all messed up. And in Romans, it clarifies for us. It says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Every single person has fallen short. But the good news here, all the way back in Malachi, the good news is that Jesus has more grace than you have problems. He has more love for you than you have mistakes to make. And so for every time that you're like, I think I'm going to, whatever the sin in your life is, Jesus is there to say, hey, I handled it. Huge relief. Release that to Jesus. When we make statements like, you should lay that at the foot of the cross, that's a very churchy thing to do. Oh, you should take that frustration, you should lay it there. But do that. That's what God is saying here. This is not a new problem, so just rest in the fact that I'm going to handle this problem. because you're not doing a great job. And if that's the case, then he says, return to me. So like put it down, come back to the way that I asked you to do things, and then I will return to you. Which we see echoed repeatedly through the New Testament. You see James say, you seek after me and I'll seek after you. Those who seek the Lord are found by the Lord. Like this kind of idea is repeated constantly. So it's not a one-off that just gets dropped in the Old Testament that you're supposed to hopefully discover. It's not like a needle that you have to discover in a haystack of other really good ideas. This is a consistent and really rich teaching that God is trying to get you to notice. If you follow me, I'm there for you. And that doesn't mean that you have to find him before he finds you. So this isn't a salvation passage. This isn't for you to like hear and then go, oh, well, in order to be saved, I have to chase after him. No, we know that the shepherd leaves the 99. He comes to find us. But then in a found place, in a place where you are with God, know that as you focus on him, you'll start to see more of him. Actually, what's really funny is the secular world has sort of stolen this idea, and they now call it the law of attraction, which I laugh every time I hear somebody say, oh, I manifest that. No. You're noticing things more because you're thinking about things more. Has anybody ever played, I think it's called something different here, but have you ever played Punch Buggy? I don't know what it's called here. My son said it was called something different. I don't know. It's when you're driving in a car and you see a Volkswagen Beetle and you go Punch Buggy red and you get to punch the person next to you. It's a very violent game that I used to play as a child. Slug bug, there you go. It's the same. I'm from Florida, guys. It's the same thing, right? So you're playing this, what is it, slug bug? So you're playing slug bug, and all of a sudden you think, man, there are a lot of Volkswagens in this town. Have you ever noticed when your kids aren't in the car, there's none? Like if you're not playing that game, nobody owns that car? As a thought experiment, I'm going to challenge you to do it. Play the game with a different car, and suddenly you'll find that there's a lot of those. It's so weird, right? What if you played it with like, I don't know, F-150s? Suddenly everyone owns that. Or play it with like, right? I mean, everybody does own one of those. But like, whatever you play it with, suddenly they're everywhere. It's the same thing. And so God isn't saying all of a sudden you're going to like pay attention to me and now I'm going to bless you. He's saying, I'm blessing you because I love you. Pay attention and you'll see it. It's not a mystery to be solved. It's not if you give me more money, then suddenly like I'm going to bless you. That's not what it is. It's the more you pay attention to what I'm doing, the more you'll notice what I'm doing. It's like a seeing eye puzzle. You stare long enough, you're like, oh, nice. Maybe that was maybe over a bunch of people's heads. Do you guys remember seeing eye puzzles? There's a lot of nostalgia in the sermon today. Anyway, so as we move into the sort of the meat of the discussion tonight, or this morning, wow, days, about what God's saying, just know he's not suddenly promising new things. These are things that he's already freely giving because God's grace is free, that it's up to us to just pause and reflect on the fact that we have it. So when we talk about like shepherding of our resources, it's resources that he's blessing us with that we get to take notice of and be blessed by awareness of. It's not anything more than that. So if you're like, I don't see God in my life, it's not because he's not there. Just slow down and notice. And if you're like, he's not talking to me, he is. Or he's not, I don't need to communicate with him because he does. He always answers. He's always there. He's always pouring out his blessings. You just have to slow down and recognize it. And so I'd like to talk about decisions that we make as people that I'm calling poor decisions by breaking it down into two things: types of people and reasons for giving. And I think there's 4 for each of those categories. There's 4 types of people, there's 4 reasons for giving. And what's funny is we sort of lose track of these things, and we're going to start with types of people. Typically, we refer to 2 types of people. We say there are poor people and there are rich people. And this is like the basis of every political argument. It's often the basis of a lot of church arguments. It's just, for whatever reason, these are the 2 kinds of people. And I would submit to you, that's nonsense. The Bible actually would argue on my side on that one. It's nonsense. There are actually 4 kinds of people. 2 of them are poor and 2 of them are rich. And it looks sort of like this: godly poor, ungodly poor, and then godly rich and ungodly rich. And I think seeing it that way helps us to understand what God is talking about in this passage. And so we're just going to break each of them down a little bit and sort of figure out what is God saying. And so we'll start with poor. It's really easy for us historically to look at people who are poor in like the 19th century and on and say, well, they're not working hard enough because we've created this weird like work mindset. And so they don't work hard enough, they don't have enough money, or they've not been responsible and so they don't have enough money. But actually, in the Bible, you get a really powerful picture of two kinds of what poor is. And if you go far enough back in history, you'll actually find that Christianity has wrestled with what it means to be poor so often that it's actually gone from poor being the best possible scenario to poor being the worst possible scenario a couple of times. There was a time where it was believed that you physically could not be saved if you had money. Like you just couldn't. And they took passages like, it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich person to enter the kingdom of God, which is a real teaching that Jesus did. It's in the Bible, it's there. But what Jesus was saying was not, if you have a lot of money, you're out of luck unless you can shove a camel through the eye of a needle. That wasn't his point. The point was, if you can't submit to me, then you're not saved. You have to submit your life to Jesus. That's the point. But if you have no need for submission because you have every possible need covered in your life, if you have so much money that you don't want or need anything, you don't ever look for a savior because you don't notice the need for saving. That was the point that he was making. And so there was a time in history where to be poor was to be the absolute best possible scenario because you needed God for everything. But the Bible isn't that way either. And so my hope is that we sort of figure out how to land right in the center and recognize there are two kinds of people as it relates to being poor. There are the godly poor, people who are choosing to not seek after anything worldly, and then if it comes to them, great. So those are the people that you would notice who, like, have you ever noticed a homeless person who's just singing even though it's freezing outside? And they're like singing praise to God, and you're like, I couldn't imagine living that way because you've settled into your life, but they've settled into theirs and they're okay with it. Or like monks historically didn't have any value to their own, they had no assets of their own. Like throughout history, and even to today, there are people who recognize that, like we hear in Matthew, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness and all the other things will be given to you as well. That passage can settle into your heart so that you are okay with whatever you have. There's like a humble acceptance of whatever your monetary situation is so that you don't want for anything, even though other people might see you and think that you ought to. There's power in that because you can rest in Jesus, and everything else is sort of extra. But then there's also ungodly poor, people who are not considered, who aren't considerate of the fact that God is blessing them, who aren't looking at their finances and thinking God gave them that or God blessed them in any way. There are people that if they won the lottery somehow end up poorer afterwards. They're not wise with their resources. They're not shepherding what God has blessed them with. And that doesn't mean that they aren't godly people in general. They're ungodly with respect to the way that they handle their resources. So I think it's important maybe before we go into the rich piece to talk about what resources are. There are three kinds of resources that God blesses us with. He blesses us with time, with talent, and with treasure, which I love because they all start with T. Time, talent, and treasure. Those are the things God gives you. And so you can be really wealthy, you can be very rich in one of those things and not in others of those things. So for example, you can be the absolute most talented human being on the planet and be what the world would refer to as a starving artist. You could have $0 in your bank account, but be rich in God's kingdom. You could know the Bible like the back of your hand, and you can be so steeped in his word that nothing bothers you and yet have pennies to your name. So there are lots of different ways in which to experience those three resources. But then God is saying, hey, if you shepherd your resources well, then you'll see all of the blessings that I've prepared for you. You get things like the parable of the talents where God gives people, or the ruler gives people money, and then what they do with them is directly resulting in how they're blessed afterwards. But you notice that the blessing wasn't necessarily through any special action. It was just, I invested, I have more now. And the ruler says, yeah, you have more, that's great. So those who have more will be given. But the more was gained by the action that they took with the resources they were blessed with. It wasn't like, oh, you invested, so by the way, here's more money. That's not how that parable worked. Be wise with what I'm giving you to shepherd. Use your talents well, use your treasures well, but I think most importantly, hear me when I say this, most importantly, use your time well. Time, the one resource you can't earn more of, the one resource you can't replicate. Use that well, and you'll see all the blessings that I have. The floodgates will be poured open. And the reason I know this to be true is because God created a model for us all the way back in the beginning. He worked, quote unquote, worked 6 days, and then what did God do on the seventh day? He rested. What is something God doesn't ever need to do? Rest. He's God. He's all powerful. He doesn't get tired. He set up a model for us. And then, so that we have this Sabbath day practice, and then we get into the New Testament, and what do we discover? We have God in flesh. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are burdened, and I will give you rest." And he doesn't say, "I'll give you a day of rest." He says, "I will give you rest." Almost as if he says, that Sabbath thing you've been practicing, let's do it all the time. Let's rest in me all the time. What a gift. What a resource. Shepherd your time well, because you don't get it back and you can't earn more. And every once in a while, you think you have a lot of it, and then suddenly you don't. So, okay, godly and ungodly poor. So godly rich might be a person who has lots of money and chooses to invest it to build God's kingdom. And that person might be a Christian. They might not. I want you to hear as I go through this list, I'm not saying Christian and unchristian poor and Christian and not Christian rich. I'm saying there are godly ways to use your resources and ungodly ways to use your resources. So all four of these might be Christians. Don't get it twisted. You're not locked in to godly poor or godly rich. If you have resources and you are shepherding them poorly, you are in the ungodly category. That's what God is trying to teach you here. So I'll give you an example. He uses the word tithe a couple of times, which we, I think, in society have made out to just mean donation. The word tithe is tenth. So there's a lot of teachings on what that word is meant to be in the Old Testament. It's a tenth of your resources. It's the first and the best of whatever you've grown or whatever you've raised, because they were an agricultural society. And so as we get into this world that we inhabit, where everything is done using money, we sort of lose track and we get focused on as long as we're giving. And this is not me as your pastor saying, hey, give more. That's not my point. My point is, what God is saying is, whatever your resources are, I, God, expect that you are going to shepherd them well, because they don't belong to you. I want you to use them in a way that honors me, because they belong to me. You have them because I've given them to you. That's the message God has. And so he says, test me in this, even though you find in other places where God says he cannot be tested. His whole point is, even if you wanted to try to screw around with this, it wouldn't matter. It's always going to work out the way that I'm telling you it will. So test me if you want. It's going to happen. If you give in the way that I'm suggesting, you will experience blessing in the way that I'm suggesting. That is what God is trying to teach his people. And they still don't get it. They're still not figuring it out. And so my hope for everyone in this room is that what we do is we experience this understanding that the things that we have don't belong to us. And so there's nothing we can do that will stop God from giving or taking as he sees fit, because they're his. I want to give you one example, and then we're going to move from types of people to the rest of our sermon. If I handed you $20, let's say you and I are out, we're driving around, and I give you a $20 bill. You didn't ask. You're not like, hey, can I get a 20? I just handed you one as we pulled into a gas station. I said, hey, can you run in and grab me a soda? You can keep the rest. Or pop, sorry. You can keep the rest. That's like an $18 bonus. That's a lot of dollars to come out with carbonated drink for me. You would be like, wow, thanks so much. You don't have to do that. You'd push back a little. It would feel weird to receive that. But you'd probably, if I push hard enough, keep the money, I imagine, right? But there's no world where you don't bring me back out a drink. No matter how you push about what to do with the 18, the guaranteed part of this transaction is you'll bring me a drink, right? No one disagrees with me? So I want to play out for you the way that God is saying we act with our resources. I give you the 20, you come back out, you've spent no dollars, you just kept the 20. And I go, hey, where's my Coke? Yeah, the mortgage is due. I needed the money. Yeah, but it was mine. You took my money. Give me my money back. No, that's the 20 went in the bank account. I used the ATM when I was inside. No, that's my 20. What are you doing? Yeah, I'm $20 short, and so that was the 20 that I needed, and so now my mortgage is paid. Thanks. Doesn't that sound like weird and wrong to you? You're like, what? How can you invest this money in a thing that I gave you? That's crazy. So now, insert God into me as the $20 and insert you as the person who refused to buy the drink. That is what God is trying to teach us. I'm giving you money. I'm just asking that you acknowledge that it's mine and do with it the way that I'm asking you to do with it. That I think is probably the best way that I can explain it. Hopefully that landed well. Let's keep going. So 4 reasons to give. So now we've talked about the ways in which to be aware of your shepherding. Now we're going to talk about the reasons why we give. I recognize it's a little odd that this is sort of the end of the year, and so there's this sense in which we spend money all over the place because it's Christmas, and so everything is suddenly more expensive, which is odd. And we have to buy lots more things, which is very timely. And so I just want to sort of point out that tithing is, and this is like an expansion of the way that I refer to every offering we've ever received. Tithing is not us just giving to the church. You'll notice that's up there. Supporting the church, though, is one of 4 reasons we give. And the other 3, I think, are substantially more important. Please don't hear that and think, oh, I don't have to give to the church anymore. More important because of what it is, not in usefulness to God's kingdom. So we're going to start with the first one, to put God first. It's an exercise. You're supposed to give the first 10%. When shepherds or farmers in Old Testament times would give their tithe, it was the first 10% of their crop. They would do like a survey of their land, and they would say, this is the best area of growth this season. And they would quarter off 10% or corner off 10%, and that would be what they gave. Because they recognize they wouldn't have the other 90 without this 10 that God blessed them with. So if God gave me all of it, I want to give him my best as a thank you. So you're acknowledging that everything I have, all of my health, all of my resources, all of my free time, all of my everything is God's here. Here's a small piece of thanks that I can give to you. So you're putting him first in your life. Now, I want you to think about the message that it might receive if you just make sure that you've covered 10%, but it's like the last 10%. Because then you're saying to God, hey, I still had this left over. I didn't forget about you. Which, like, okay, maybe that's the same thing because it's 10% and you gave it to him. So, like, in your head, maybe you're thinking, it's the same. It's still 10%. And so I want you to change the pronouns there. Rather than it being God and you, I want it to be you and your young children at Christmas. Hey, I got you a gift because I had money left over after I paid the bills. Merry Christmas. What message is that? Like, if you said that to your child, how many of you would have a Merry Christmas that year? And you'd be like, but I still got you something. Yeah, but it's like the least amount of importance in your life. You wouldn't do that. You prioritize your children to the best of your ability because you love them and you care about them. And you hope that that's a message you teach them to do with their children and with you when they get older and they're adults and they have jobs, which we're all hoping for. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we acknowledge that God sees us as putting him first. Then the second thing is to increase our faith. What do I mean increase our faith? Well, if you're doing the first thing, that means you're taking 10% right off the top before you've covered any of your bills, before you've gone grocery shopping, before you've done anything, which means you're now operating at 90% of your income, which can be sort of scary, especially if you're on a tight budget. And so what I'd like to do is I want to share a story that I refer to as God math. It's a personal story. I didn't ask permission first, but I'm going to do it anyway. My wife has heard me tell the story, and so hopefully I don't get in trouble later. When we first found Jesus, so like 6-ish years ago, I felt a calling to work for the church. Do you know what the church didn't experience at the same time? Additional funding to pay me. But I just felt like this is what I really needed to do. And so I had like a part-time job. I was kind of a realtor, but if you know anybody who's in realty, it's not a part-time deal. And so you don't do really well if you do it part-time. You have to do it like 3 times time in order to do really well in real estate. But I wanted to work for the church. So I got hired as a maintenance person. And those of you that have helped me in my move-in process, I don't know how to fix things. So I wasn't great at a maintenance job, but they hired me for it because I was really good with people. But their salary offer was not what I needed to cover my bills. I just knew that I was going to serve God, and I didn't care. And maybe that's really irresponsible of me financially. Definitely that was irresponsible of me financially. I shouldn't say maybe. But I just knew that that's what God wanted me to do. I was just convinced this is where God is leading me. And so I left real estate entirely, which I shouldn't have started in the first place. And I went and I worked for the church. And I can tell you from a financial perspective, I'm not great at numbers, and I'm not going to share those numbers with you, but let's just say they were red all the time. Which for those of you that don't use colors, they use computers, we didn't have enough to cover our bills. But, and the reason I tell all this story is every month after I started tithing, which was an insane move to make, if I already don't make enough money, how am I giving to the church? But I started tithing because I was starting to learn about what it means to submit to God. I was a new Christian. I was like, I want to do everything for God. God is amazing. God is great. And so I wanted to do everything well. And so I started giving. And from the month that I started giving of my life and of my resources to God, from that month forward, everything was paid every month. Now, numerically, there's no possible way that that happened. So I call it God math. But what I will say is, I have never been closer to God ever than in the months where I know for a fact I'm going to be short. Because at the end of the month when I'm not short, there's no other person to give credit to. Wouldn't it be ridiculous if all of the bills are paid and I walked around look what I did. I covered those bills. I'm amazing. Do you know the first person who would have smacked me was? She lives with me. She's laughing. Hi, honey. It's lunacy. But the reason I share that with you is the movements that we go through in giving God our first fruits is an exercise in trusting that he will do more with our 90% than we can do on our own with 100. And I'm going to repeat that in case you missed it. God can do more with our 90 than we can do with 100. If you're a note taker, write that down. So then, okay, the third thing, support his church. I don't think anybody needs an explanation of this. There's electrical bills. We have to pay those. Everything the church does requires money because that's how the world works. And so to hire a pastor, you need to give him a paycheck. And to clean the building, you have to pay the janitor. And to pay for the water, you have to have a water bill. All those things require money. All the events that we do require funding. Those are obvious things. So to support his church is the one that everybody knows. That's the extent of my explanation of it. The last one, be more like God, which is also sort of a strange one. So when I say, we're going to talk about receiving an offering, nobody probably thinks, this is my chance to be more like God. But I challenge you to think that way every Sunday morning, and here's why. And actually, I think it's beautiful because it was read to us during the children's program. For God so loved the world, he gave. He gave himself. He is a giving God. And so when we give back, when we give of our resources, we are exercising a muscle that God is perfect at using. He loved, and so he gave. And when we give, we are expressing our love to him. We can be more like him by giving. This is not a pep rally towards pulling out your checkbooks. This is me saying, hey, here's a way in which God wants us to know how to be like him. And it's the same way that when you have a small child who walks out of your closet wearing your shoes and your hat and your coat, and it just looks ridiculous, but they're just proud as heck to be wearing your stuff because they look a little like you. That's what God is saying. You're going to look so bad because you're giving 10%. I gave my son. It's not even close, but you're trying and you're starting to get it. That's what we're supposed to take away from this shepherding exercise called tithing. We get to be more like him. And what a blessing it would be to try to walk around in shoes that don't fit because they belong to God. So, okay, those are the reasons. And now what does it look like to experience an overflowing? What does it really look like? Well, I think it looks like all of the nations calling us blessed. And so we're like, that doesn't help me at all. I want you to read with me. Read verse 12 with me once more. Actually, before we start. This is an Old Testament statement. All the nations will call you blessed. But the word nations is a little bit of an odd thing because it's not geographical. It's not referring to other nations. It's referring to other people groups. And so when you hear all the nations, I don't want to replace it in the text, but think about it this way. When it says all the nations, think of it as everybody you encounter. Okay? Verse 12. Where is it? There it is. Then all the nations will call you blessed, for yours will be a delightful land, says the Lord Almighty. Everyone's going to call you blessed. Every single group of people you encounter, everyone who notices you, everyone will notice you, and they will all say that you are a blessing. They will say you are a blessed land. And there's a formula that we've seen over and over and over again, says the Lord Almighty. It's almost like him signing his name to it. It's like the signature line on the bottom of a check. If that's not there, the check doesn't matter. Like someone could hand you like $1 billion, but if nobody signed it, it doesn't matter. It's not valid. So that's the formula that we've seen repeatedly. And I think it's more important perhaps in this moment than ever because he says, hey, other people are going to see that you're blessed. Well, how are they going to see that? Because you flaunt it? I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is when you notice and you understand all of the experiences that God is providing for you and the way that he's enriching your life, you carry yourself differently. Or Jesus puts it this way, you're the light of the world. You're the light. People notice because you are lighting their way. And so he says, everyone's going to see that. They're going to call you blessed. They're going to say your blessing is awesome. And actually what's funny, as we wrap up, that's something that the people of Israel yelled back at God just a few lines up in the text. So if you're curious later, read back to what we just finished reading a few weeks ago. They were like, everybody else is blessed except us. God's like, hey, I wonder if you just quieted down for a minute and just notice what's happening in your life. And so that's sort of where I want to leave you is what if you just quieted down for a minute and noticed what's happening in your life? Wouldn't you maybe find that there's joy in everything? There's joy in the offerings that you receive from him. There's joy in the offerings the church receives from you. There's joy when your children are misbehaving because there's one day where your house is going to be really quiet and you're going to miss them. There's joy in the mess that you have to clean up because somebody else didn't do it. There's joy in the work that you have to do because other people aren't able to. There's joy in giving more than you've ever given in your life because now you can give more because you have more. There's joy in everything. Or even there's joy in having nothing because the one thing that can't be taken from you lives inside. And so we have one more week before Christmas. We have exactly 7 days to really reflect on what it means to receive the ultimate gift. But I want you to think, what would it look like to exercise the joy of Christmas every moment of every day? That's what Advent is supposed to do for us. What if the whole year was like that? What if every Sunday we thought, at least for a second, what a gift I have? And then we thought, I'm going to give that gift to others. I think that's maybe part of the true spirit of Christmas, and I think that's part of what we're supposed to take away from the text today, and so that's where I'm going to leave you. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the way that you gift us everything. We thank you that you have blessed us so abundantly. We pray that you'd continue to help us to see that always. Help us to be faithful in the resources you give us. Help us to be calm and content with what we have, regardless of how much of what we have. Thank you that you've blessed us with the only thing that no one can take away, and that you've blessed us in such a way that we receive it and we have it forever. Thank you that nothing we do can cause us to lose it. Help us, Father, to trust that and to act as though it were true all the time. Help us to put you on display so that a world that needs to know you would know you through us. We ask and pray in the beautiful name of Jesus. Amen.